You know the feeling when a story's middle just sags. The beginning is great, the ending is planned, but that huge chunk in the center just feels like it's dragging its feet. It's a super common writing problem. I even talked about it in my last story structure video about the 3-act structure. But there's a 19th century German playwright who actually came up with the perfect solution. Hey guys, my name is Jason, and as someone who geeks out about storytelling more than almost anything, I love finding tools that solve these exact kinds of problems. It's what inspired me to write my own plot structure book known as the 40-chapter plot module. And today we're talking about Freytag's pyramid, a structure built around a massive turning point right in the middle of the story's midpoint that completely flips the narrative on its head. This is one part of my ongoing series on story structures, and it's one of the most misunderstood, so let's fix that. Freytag's pyramid isn't a one-size-fits-all formula. It was designed by observing classical Greek and Shakespearean tragedies, so it's tailor-made for stories about fatally flawed heroes and downbeat endings that pack a serious punch. It breaks a story down into 5 distinct parts: the introduction, the rise, the climax, the fall, and catastrophe. Now, even if you don't write tragedy, understanding this structure is like learning a secret language of storytelling. It teaches you how to manage tension and create an emotional arc that feels inevitable and deeply satisfying. Let's break down each stage. Act 1, the introduction. The first act is all about orientation. It answers the reader's first 2 questions: where am I, and what's happening? This is where you establish the status quo, the normal world before everything goes sideways. You introduce the main characters, their relationships, and necessary backstory to understand what's at stake. Think of the opening of Romeo and Juliet. We immediately learn about the 2 feuding families in Verona. We meet Romeo, lovesick over someone who isn't Juliet, which establishes his passionate, impulsive character. We see the world as it exists before the real story kicks off. This act ends with what Freytag called the exciting force, what we now call the inciting incident. It's the event that disrupts the norm and sets the story in motion. For Romeo, it's the decision to crash the Capulets party. This single choice triggers a chain reaction that will ultimately lead to ruin. It's the first domino to fall. But what an inciting incident does is kick off the next and often longest phase of the story. Act 2, the rise. The second act, the rising action, is the build-up. The inciting incident has lit a fuse, and in this act, we watch it burn. The tension escalates, the plot gets more complex, and new obstacles are thrown in the protagonist's path. The hero is actively pursuing a goal, but their every action creates new reactions and complications. Freytag called this the play and counterplay, like a game of chess where every move by the protagonist is met with a counter move from an opponent. This creates a spiraling acceleration toward the story's turning point. Importantly, this phase often contains a false sense of hope. Things might seem to be going the protagonist's way even as the stakes are getting higher. For instance, in Hamlet, the rising action is his feigning madness, his plots to expose his murderous uncle, and the mounting pressure from the court. He's actively trying to achieve his goal of revenge, but each step he takes complicates his situation and pushes him further from his old life. By the end of this phase, the hero should be so entangled in the conflict that turning back is no longer an option. This leads us to the peak of the pyramid and the part that everyone gets wrong. Act 3, the climax. Now forget everything you know about the word climax. In modern storytelling, we think of climax as the final, explosive confrontation near the end of the story. Frodo at Mount Doom, for example. The final, that is not what Freytag meant. For Freytag, the climax is the literal midpoint of the story. It's the top of the pyramid, the apex of the roller coaster right before gravity takes over. It is a point of no return. It's the moment when the protagonist's fortunes reverse. And in a tragedy, this is where a hero who has been on the rise suddenly begins to fall. In a comedy, it's a character who has been struggling, who finally starts to see things turn around. This climax isn't always a huge action sequence. It can be a quiet realization or a crucial decision. Like in Macbeth, Freytag identifies the climax as the banquet scene where the ghost of Banquo appears. This is the moment Macbeth, now king, realizes his power is built on a lie and that his ambitions have doomed him. He says, "Blood will have blood," and from that point on, his paranoia and tyranny consume him, leading directly to his downfall. It's not the final battle. It's that pivot point from which there is no recovery. And this is the key to fixing a saggy middle. Instead of just adding more complications, you introduce a massive reversal that changes the entire direction of the plot. And by the way, if you'd like to learn more about how to use AI as an author-led productivity tool to help you write 12 plus books a year easily, perhaps more, and without compromising your creativity or ethics, check out the Story Hacker Gold group down below in the description. Now, once that midpoint reversal happens, the story begins its descent, leading us to Act 4, the fall. The fourth act, the falling action, is the slide into disaster. After the climax, the plot speeds forward with a chilling sense of inevitability. The hero might still struggle, but the audience knows it's hopeless. The director Ivo van Hove described this feeling perfectly. It's as if you see two cars and they are driving towards each other and you know what will happen. The tension here becomes almost unbearable because we see the tragedy coming and can do nothing to stop it. Freytag called this section the return, and it's where the consequences of the climax unfold. This is where plot twists might be revealed or where the hero's flaws fully take control, and you focus on fewer characters and scenes than in the rising action, narrowing the scope toward an unavoidable conclusion. During this fall, Freytag noted the importance of the force of final suspense, a last fleeting moment of hope that tragedy might be averted. Juliet fakes her death, hoping to reunite with Romeo. For a second, we think it might work, but this glimmer of hope only makes the final crash even more devastating when it ultimately fails. This is the unwinding of everything the hero fought for in the first half. And it leads directly into Act 5, the catastrophe. The final act brings that catastrophe. This is when the character is brought to their absolute lowest point. It is the forceful, violent conclusion to all the building tension. It's when Oedipus blinds himself, when Gatsby is murdered, or when Romeo and Juliet lie dead in the tomb. Everything the protagonist has feared since the first act finally comes true. This isn't just a sad ending for the sake of it. Because of the structure, the catastrophe feels earned and meaningful. It's the logical conclusion of the hero's flaws and choices. Following the catastrophe, many stories include a denouement, a French word meaning to untie. This is a short scene that wraps up any loose ends, and we see the consequences of the hero's fall on the surviving characters and the world. At the end of Romeo and Juliet, the feuding families finally agree to make peace, but only after their children's death have forced their hands. The denouement provides a final sense of resolution and lets the audience process the tragedy that just unfolded. So now you see the shape, but to really understand it, you need to know where it came from. Gustav Freytag wasn't just some guy with a whiteboard. He was a prominent German novelist and playwright in the mid-19th century, deeply engaged in the politics and literature of his time. He published his theory in 1863 in a book called Technique of the Drama, and it was groundbreaking. Instead of laying down abstract rules, he did something far more practical. He reverse-engineered success. Freytag was obsessed with classical Greek tragedies and Shakespeare. He looked at plays like Oedipus Rex and Hamlet, stories that had captivated audiences for centuries by that point, and still today, and asked, why do these work so well? He saw a pattern, a play and counterplay of rising and falling action around a central turning point. The pyramid wasn't a prescription, it was a description of a powerful dramatic engine he saw operating again and again. His work built on ideas from Aristotle, who first said that a story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end, but Freytag gave that structure a dynamic shape, visualizing the rise and fall of dramatic tension. The symmetrical triangle that he drew showed how a tragic hero's fortunes rise in the first half of the story, only to be completely reversed at the midpoint climax, leading to an inevitable fall. Of course, Freytag's pyramid has its critics. Some writers like Chuck Wendig have famously called it BS, arguing that it's too rigid and leads to formulaic writing, which is a common criticism of any structure out there. They point out that many modern stories, especially in film, place the big climax much closer to the end, around the 85% mark, leaving little room for a long drawn-out fall. But as we already kind of mentioned, the climax in the center of Freytag's pyramid is not the same as the climax that we get in a modern three-act structure. If you reinterpret Freytag's climax as a midpoint reversal, his model aligns surprisingly well with many contemporary structures, including the three-act structure. The pyramid is not the only way to tell a story, though. There are non-linear narratives like Pulp Fiction and character-driven pieces like Lost in Translation that ignore this structure entirely. But dismissing Freytag's work is a mistake. Understanding it gives you a powerful tool. Even if you choose to break the rules, you first have to know what the rules are. Freytag's pyramid illuminates why a strong midpoint reversal can electrify a story, solving that dreaded saggy middle and ensuring your narrative has momentum from start to finish. I would also point out that it's important to have a structure like this and slavishly adhere to it when you're just starting out, because you can't break the rules until you have mastered them. Freytag's pyramid is just one of the many tools we can use to build better stories. And if you're serious about mastering the craft from developing your initial idea all the way to marketing a finished book, I put everything you need in one place. And for that, I'd like to invite you to my school group, the Story Hacker Gold. Inside, you'll find my entire step-by-step process to take you from a blank page to a book in hand. We cover all the tools you need to market it, and we even explore how AI can enhance your process without diminishing your own creativity or compromising your ethics. The group includes weekly live calls with me, a full library of all my ebooks and audiobooks for authors, and a vibrant community of writers who are on the same journey. So if you're ready to take your writing to the next level, the link is in the description. And I'll see you in the next video.